All right. Seems like we are streaming now on YouTube. So first, I would like to say, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second reentry lunch and learn on talking about the sex offender registry and also understanding the criminal justice system. First, I would like to introduce Karen Reese from Nehemiah, well, Dr. Karen Reese. And then also one of our other lovely speakers will be Latoya Greer from Wisconsin Free Campaign. And then also we have Aaron Hicks, also from Nehemiah. Thank you all for being on with us today. Really appreciate the individuals. Well, I appreciate the participants that are logging on, but also appreciate you all making time to make this. This is so important, not only just to us as an organization, but also to our community, because there's a lot of things that are just not, I mean, one is not talked about, but then two, the fact of there's just not a lot that we know about, right? As a greater community. If I wasn't involved in this work, I would not know myself. So just want to say I appreciate every single last one of you. Karen Reese, if you don't mind, if you don't mind going first, please, and
Yeah,
introducing
thanks.
yourself.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the introduction, and thanks for those of you who were here last month, and welcome to those of you who are coming for the first time. Um, I also just want to emphasize that this is a subject that can be really sensitive or triggering to some people. So while we're going to be talking about um, the sex offender registry and the laws that relate to it, you'll also hear some lived experience. And so just a note to be mindful, take care of yourself, as this can be an intense subject at some times. So moving ahead, let me pull up my slides here. So last time we talked a lot about, the background of where our laws about sex-related crimes come to be. We talked about some of the myths and truths about this. And so just as a quick review, some of the original legislation it got started in 1994 with the Jacob Wetterling Act, which started the basic version of the registry. But at this point, we are only supposed to be notifying law enforcement. 1996 with Megan's Law, this is where we started mandating public disclosure. And so this is where we saw, some online searchable systems start to pop up, and also some direct notifications to the community about people convicted of certain crimes. The Walsh Act really changed the game in 2006. And just as a reminder, Adam Walsh was the son of the man who started America's Most Wanted, which was a show on catching suspected criminals who were sort of in the wind and not able to be found. And so the stories would highlight people who are out there, and then the public would be charged with finding them and reporting them. But one of the things that the Walsh Act did for the sex offender registry was mandated that states require minimum standards within a certain period of time related to the registry, or they were at risk of losing their federal funding. So this is a technique that's been used for a variety of circumstances, particularly in the criminal justice area, where requirements are put in place, and other areas we've heard a lot about it too, but requirements are put in place, and if you don't put those requirements in place, you lose money. And so then you see teams scrambling to put requirements in place, and due to time restrictions, these requirements may or may not be up to date with best practice, up to date with best policy, or really put together based on any data. So a lot of things that happen in our laws is people, think something should work, but in practice, we don't always find that it's effective. And so this is where we started to see pilot programs for electronic monitoring, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and then also our special bulletin notifications. So here are just a few of the common offenses that require registration in Wisconsin. If you're convicted under one of these offenses, the judge can't keep you off the registry. You're automatically on there by law. If this is hard to read, the statute is 301.45. If you can Google Wisconsin statute 301.45 and you can read this for yourself. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it's some examples. So first, second, or third degree sexual assault of an adult or a child, repeated acts, exploitation by a therapist, incest, exposing a child to harmful materials, pornography, all kinds of things like that. But there are a few offenses. So for the ones listed on the slide, the majority of offenses require you to register for 15 years, and that's 15 years starting when your sentence ended. So sometimes what we'll see is people will be convicted of other crimes or serving other prison sentences, be revoked on other prison sentences, and this can lengthen the amount of time since the conviction that the person ends up on the registry. So, for example, someone who was convicted of an offense in the 90s, if they, started their prison sentence, was on community supervision, got revoked, went back, that length gets longer. They end their sentence in, let's say, 2008, they would still be on the registry today, even though the crime was committed in 96. But there's a few crimes that require lifetime registration. And again, this is required by law. So first degree sexual assault of an adult or a child, repeated acts with a child. There is a chapter called 980, which is a certain assessment that is for the people that are of the highest risk or viewed to be sexually violent. They will be classified under this chapter, and we'll talk about what else happens there. One of the more contentious pieces of this is that you can also be on lifetime registration if you have 2 or more convictions of the same sexual offense. Now, in the past, that's been viewed as, 2 separate cases. But in the last couple of years, we've saw a great increase of people who are on lifetime registration and also GPS monitoring because of this interpretation being, is it 2 separate cases? Or sometimes within a criminal case, we'll see multiple charges within that criminal case. And so the Department of Corrections interpret this to be, so let's say you had 2 separate counts of sexual assault in your one criminal case. They interpreted that to mean 2 or more convictions. So this stuff can get pretty difficult to interpret. As I said, under the Walsh Act, we have this community notification process, and one is called special bulletin notification. It's not necessarily all of the people who are on the lifetime registration list, but usually acts that are considered more on the serious end are going to require direct notification to communities. And this is if you're convicted of 2 or more registerable offenses, so looking for a pattern, or if you're under 980, you're always automatically going to be under that chapter. As we talked about last time, the Madison area does not have any limits where people who are on the registry can live. But I just wanted to show you a couple of real actual signs that exist in communities. So pedophile-free zones, public notice outside of someone's home that says they're a sexual predator. And then you can also look up Madison Police Sex Offender Bulletin, and you can have a closer look at this, but this is an example of what a bulletin might look like. And if you can see in the bold here, it emphasizes this person was not wanted by the police at this time. So just to emphasize on the bulletin that to the community that basically you shouldn't harass this person. The memo goes on to list the specific crimes that person was convicted of, including their pictures and their physical description. So it's pretty well known that people have used this information not for protection of their families, but to carry out vigilante acts on people who are in these notifications. So harassing them, telling people all over the community, even people that are on the registry and not on the bulletin. If a neighbor finds out they're on the registry, we've seen people targeted by, someone telling everyone at their kids' school about what's going on, putting up flyers with the neighbors, and all sorts of things, or, calling and getting people fired from jobs, all sorts of things that really get in the way of a person living a full life in the community, which is what we want to see when someone finishes their sentence. It is also what really reduces crime and increases public safety, is when people are able to live a regular, stress-free, quality life in the community. So chapter 980, as I mentioned, and I just wanted to, one more thing about the bulletins. This is determined by the criteria that I listed, but also there's a core team that consists of law enforcement, a registry specialist, probation parole agent, field supervisor, victim witness coordinator, and a district attorney's office, and they deliberate these on a case-by-case basis to determine which ones should be SBN. So it's a lot of people who are looking in on this. There are 3 levels here. Level 1 is where there's community notification required, but we're just going to let law enforcement know that this person is in the area. Level 2 is where specific individuals and groups might be given this information. So if there's a victim in the area, or like the person had crimes against elderly and there's a senior citizen home in the area, that might be the level of notification. And then level 3, which is what you're seeing on the screen, is community-wide notification, where you have this information that's disseminated not only by the police department, but will also often be picked up by news outlets and reported that way as well. So for 980, this is a situation that has been under a lot of debate over the years. And so there are situations where a person who is deemed to be very high risk and violent, should they be let out of prison, was the big question. And so one of the ways around our legislative code was to look at a term of civil commitment for people in this category. So there's a treatment facility called Sandridge Secure Treatment Center. It's in Boston, Wisconsin. And when a person is nearing the end, a person who has been classified under 980, or a person who others believe should be classified, there's a review process that can happen as a person is nearing the time when they might get out of prison. And there will be an assessment done and a determination whether or not there should be a hearing to civilly commit this person. So there's some level of due process here, but it's largely based on the determinations of clinicians and Department of Corrections. And at Sandridge, they're going to assess the individual to see what their actual risk level is, mandated treatment and teaching, and also preparing people to be returned back to the community, because the ultimate goal is not to keep them under lock and key for the rest of their lives, but to rehabilitate and get people to a point where they can live in the community. There's also some research that happens here to determine causes and treatment of violence. There's a couple of different statutes and administrative codes that regulate what's happening here. I just pulled a couple out so that you could see examples. The complicated part, if you're trying to understand where in our laws, the restrictions and decisions are made by the Department of Corrections, you're going to have to look in 2 places. One is the Wisconsin statutes, and the other is the Department of Corrections Administrative Code. You can search either one of those in Google, Wisconsin statutes or Wisconsin Department of Corrections Administrative Code, and you will get basically the whole list of everything that's in there. Chapter 301 talks a lot about managing basically just corrections. So what is corrections required by law to do? A couple of those chapters include honesty testing of sex offenders, which is a polygraph. I'll mention that again in a minute. Electronic monitoring and global positioning system tracking, and residency requirements for certain sex offenders. And then the DOC administrative codes, if you look in 328 through 332, you're going to find a lot of the policies and regulations that are under here. And one of the things that you'll see is requirements about not only who is supposed to be on GPS, but what do they need to do, and then what are the requirements for if a GPS loses signal, whether or not the person has to be detained. When people are at or come out of a sentence of after having being sentenced for a crime related to a sexual offense, there are different types of treatment that can happen. There's a common myth that there's no treatment that can work for someone who has been convicted of this type of crime. But one of the things that we have to remember is that the people on our registry aren't just the most violent. We have a whole separate legislative category and process for people who are determined to be high risk repeat offenders on this in this issue, and then also certain strategies to regulate this in the community. But people on the registry are all the way from that level of serious down to someone who maybe exposed themselves in public, or the case of someone in their early 20s that dates a teenager and gets reported for it. So there's a lot of different levels here that have kind of been lumped together. So certainly there are very extreme pathologies that maybe aren't susceptible to treatment, but most people who are in any kind of been convicted of any kind of crime, and most human beings will benefit from cognitive behavioral treatment. And it's as beneficial for people who have convicted of these sex offenses as well. So that cognitive behavioral therapy is a very specific type of therapy that looks at the way a person thinks and makes decisions. This can be used for, like, if you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to sleep better, you might use a cognitive behavioral therapy approach that kind of retrains your mind to associate, certain ways of doing things with ways of thinking. Psychotherapy or counseling. So also, just kind of going back in time, looking at the reasons for why this might have been committed, looking at the aftermath of the effects on a person after they have committed this crime. What does that look like? And going through all of those thoughts and feelings and ways of coping and going out into the community. There are medical treatments for certain types of sex offenders, which include medication, and also chemical castration, which essentially uses medication to eliminate a person's sexual arousal. There are a couple of physiological tools that are used out there. One is known as a penile plethysmograph. That's a tricky word to say. But essentially what happens is this is attached to a machine that's attached to genitalia, and then the person is exposed to images that may or may not be sexually arousing, and the test monitors sexual arousal in that way. And the other thing is a polygraph, which you saw is one thing required by law, that there's honesty testing for sexual offenders. And so when a person is under community supervision, they are required to submit to a polygraph whenever the department requests it. And not only that, they're required to pay for that polygraph whenever the department requests it.
I had a quick question for you, Karen, just so our audience would know, as far as, especially when it comes to the polygraph, how reliable is the polygraph? I think that's
Yeah,
something that we can
actually,
talk about.
yeah, both of those physiological tools are, there's a lot of debate about whether or not they're reliable. The polygraph is not allowed to be used against a person in court. So it's unreliable enough that it can't be used as evidence to convict someone of a crime. The other really big issue is you can get a lot of false positives if a person is nervous while they're being asked questions, or you can imagine a person convicted of a sex offense being asked, if one of your rules is to not be around anyone under 18, what happens when you're on the bus and a child gets on the bus while you weren't in the company of children? In your mind, that's wondering, well, does that count? And so then if you say no to that question, you may come up as having lied. And so in this case, a person cannot be revoked from supervision only for a polygraph failure, but it's not that hard to sort of put together other allegations for technical violations to revoke a person.
And then also, if I don't know if you want to be able to talk a little bit more, I mean, for our audience, so they can kind of really understand I'm tongue tied a little bit. Plethysmograph.
Plethysmograph.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, because I think I don't want us to whiz past that. And I'm pretty sure we have a very smart audience out there may look it up or whatever. But I think that is something also to be talked about as well, and maybe even there's some other traumatizing effects from that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so essentially, as I said, the device is actually attached to genitalia. You need to be sexually aroused to get a baseline reading, and then you'll sit in a chair or lie down, and you'll be viewing images that either are what society would consider standard sexual images for arousal, and then things that society would consider criminal, and just to see what happens, what kind of response is elicited. And as I said, there's a variety of thoughts about how reliable this is or where it should be used. In some cases, it has been, some federal cases, in the past, it has been mandatory. It's now considered voluntary, but the problem with voluntary, while a person is under supervision in particular, is that you can be required by your rules to comply with any types of treatment. And so if you were to not volunteer, that could be problematic. You can imagine the level of trauma that might come with something like this. I mean, this is, and I will get into this a little later too, after I'm done presenting, but just your most intimate setting is now exposed to a stranger who is analyzing you. I don't know how else to say it, but just imagine yourself being in that room. There are also devices, and I'm not sure how often they're used for sex offenders, but for women as well, or biological females as well. So you can just imagine being in that setting, being forced to be observed in that setting, being forced to attach a device in that setting. So I'll leave that for further discussion later, but does that basically answer your question?
Thank you. I just want our audience to make sure they grasp that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the one other thing that I did want to mention here is that some of the cognitive behavioral therapy is done, or other types of treatment are done in group settings. And this could be where people are required, as part of their requirement to complete the treatment, is to openly and in detail describe the crime they committed. Now, there's not a lot of very, scientific risk assessment that's happening for people who are categorized under sex offenders. Obviously, there's levels, that we saw about notification and levels of severity and crime. But in terms of who gets put in a room together, there's a lot of evidence that we have about therapies that say if you put someone who is high risk and has committed a very serious crime in the room with someone who's low risk, you're actually negatively impacting that person who is low risk, and you may actually make them worse off based on that treatment. So you have people in there describing openly very intimate and disturbing details, and what kind of effect does that have on other people. So there are a lot of also different schools of thought about how that should be done. But the main point that's related to our sex offender registry is just we don't have a great science. I mean, there is science out there, don't get me wrong, but are we evaluating these tools that we're using widely in corrections? And the answer is not really. So
I just wanted to for the polygraph, when you shared about that, you are very correct. You solely can't just be revocated on solely failing the polygraph. However, you can be jailed, and you can be jailed for a significant amount of time. So that is something I wanted to make sure that people did know. Though they may not send you back to prison solely on the failing the polygraph, however, you can be jailed, and basically you have to say you did something in order to be released. So it's just something I wanted to make sure that the viewers knew.
Did you want to give an
Thank you,
example of
Aaron.
that, Aaron?
Sure. I mean, you gave the perfect example. Have you been around children before, or that's under the age of 18? Well, if you don't have a vehicle and you do get on the bus, or you go somewhere to get something to eat, those are all things in which you are around children who are under the age of 18, and you could fail your test. And again, as you said, you couldn't have said it no better. You do have to pay for that every time, and that costs us $350 every time you take that.
Wow.
Yeah, and as we mentioned a little bit last time, when you're convicted of a sexual offense, you're limited where you can get a job and where you can live, not really by law, but really by public perception. So it can be, if you're not able to get a good job, then how are you going to, that's a lot of money to pay for a test. So touching on GPS monitoring, so this is also by statute that people convicted of certain offenses or more than one offense will be subject to GPS monitoring. This can be used as a sanction under community supervision for someone that violates rules. This can be used for certain people with sex offenses right after they are released from prison. Sometimes they'll get this monitor for 3 months at a time while they're getting reacclimated to the community, to keep tabs on a person. And then there are also cases like Aaron will talk about where it's a lifetime. So you're going to wear, and so here's our own Mr. Aaron Hicks here, a picture from an article, featured story that was done about his situation a few years ago. You can see the bracelet on his ankle here. And then this is an up close picture of what this monitor looks like. Imagine having that on your ankle all the time for the rest of your life, or any extended period of time, right around your ankle bone at the top of the shoe. You can, take a shower and things like that, but just try to imagine what that would be like. By 2027, will be worldwide a $3.9 billion industry. So all of the things that I've talked about also have connections to private business.
Exactly.
And the way businesses stay in business is by increasing their profit margins, getting more people to buy their products. And that is very problematic when we're talking about criminal justice, because the way the business makes money is by increasing the number of people who are in this situation.
Hey, Karen, if you don't mind me just jumping in there real quick, I just want to just make sure. So what you said, I think, is very critical, right? Because of the simple fact, even though that we're, in certain states where they may not have increased privatized prisons, but they are increasing the utilization of ankle bracelets or monitoring. So there's just something else to kind of think about, as I'm pretty sure we have some advocates and things of that nature that are on the call here. But it's just something just to really, really make sure that we have to start focusing on that, and what the shift is going to be within the next, 5 or so years, or the shift that is actually, I shouldn't say 5 or so years, the shift that is actually happening right now.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And it's also relevant because, the president just issued an executive order to close private prisons. It turns out that, there's a small percentage of all people incarcerated in the US are actually in private prisons. But we have, as you said, not only GPS, but food service, sometimes laundry service, all kinds of things that are being done within prisons that are healthcare. Most of healthcare is run by private businesses too. So phone calls, yes, very expensive phone calls. So I don't know what % of that is in the US. I was trying to do a good search, and I just, I didn't spend a ton of time on it. But I did think it was interesting when I looked at this specifically for what they call personal monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of press releases from technology companies saying what a lucrative business this is, which was a little disturbing to me. And when you do that research, if you go look it up, just make sure you're looking specifically for that personal monitoring and not confusing it with other general GPS reports. There are tons and tons of problems with GPS, aside from it being traumatic and invasive and not really any due process attached to it. But there was a couple really great studies done by the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism. You can look on their website, wisconsinwatch.org. And in one of their more recent articles, they looked at problems with these bracelets for just the month of May in 2017. And I'm going to read off all these numbers. In just 1 month, there were 260,000 alerts. So there's a central monitoring center that looks for these alerts. 81,000 had to be reviewed manually. So in other words, they couldn't just be ticked off by a computer. A person had to go in and look at 81,000 results in May of 2017. The monitoring center lost connection 56,853 times with only 895 people. This is an average of 64 times the monitoring center lost connection with a person throughout the month. And a lot of these times, if you lose signal for more than a certain period of time, by law, you have to be detained. So police have to go out to your home. 32,766 alerts were due to a loss of satellite signal, and half of these were enough to be investigated. There were 52 arrest warrants issued, and this is beyond just detaining someone. Arrest warrants issued by the monitoring center, and 13 were due to technical problems. 135 requests. 13 of those were due to technical problems. And then the Department of Corrections put forth 135 requests due to technical problems to be investigated. 93 of these were for battery issues, because you do, just like your cell phone, have to charge up this device. 12 were for signal loss, and 14 were for false tamper alerts. So imagine that you have to take your cell phone and you have to strap it to your ankle. That's what this is. And so the strap over time is going to get worn out, and that can lead to a false alert. If you forget to charge up, or your charging cord, imagine with your cell phone, your charging cord breaks, you can't charge your device. You walk into a building, an elevator, a parking garage, and you lose you're on the phone and you lose that signal. This is the same technology here. And the legislation is more restrictive than the technology is able to keep up with, which results in just devastating effects for the people who are under this. Furthermore, there's not a lot of evidence that this type of monitoring is actually making us safer. There's also not a ton of evidence that Megan's Law, which set the stage for this, is actually reducing crime. And so a lot of the efforts that we've gone through over time, there's, been sort of evaluated, and they're not making us safer, period. That's what the data says. And so it's so critical that we go through and look at these. The problem is that anyone who makes this legislative change is going to be slammed in the media for being tough on crime. And we've all seen Willie Horton ads and other things like that demonize politicians who have had something happen on their watch. 15 minutes, Aaron. If it goes out for 15 minutes, then it's an automatic detainment. And if you are asleep and it disconnects from, your charger disconnects, your bracelet goes dead in the middle of the night, you can get people pounding at your door. Yeah. And so that's all I have. I'm going to stop there and want to open it up to discussion.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you, Karen, for all that wealth of knowledge, and for you being able to present that in front of our community. But also, I want to go over to LaToya, Ms. Greer, as I typically always say, just to kind of as far as what are your thoughts from just hearing all of that? I'm pretty sure some of it you knew already, but then also, if you could just kind of put it on the table, as we like to say.
Can I just add, I saw a hand raised. To those of you who are attendees, you can use the chat to talk to us and make comments, or there's a section on your screen that says Q&A. So if you have a comment or question, please use either of those boxes, and feel free to fill those up as we go. We'll take questions as we have time. Sorry, go ahead.
So for me, I find it really dehumanizing. I think I kind of spoke on this a little bit last week. Our last time we met. And I find it very dehumanizing, because these are people, we are speaking about. We aren't talking about robots. We are talking about living, breathing, human beings with spirits and souls inside of their bodies. And when we talk about these monitoring systems, where systems fail all the time, and we use these systems to determine the physical, possibilities or capabilities of human beings, it becomes dehumanizing, because we depend solely on these systems. And at no point of time in these systems do they ever state when a person is rehabilitized. When is a person actually considered rehabilitated? They aren't. They're not saying that this person is capable of change. This person is capable of growth. Although, change is the only thing that's constant. These systems are saying that people are not capable of change. And it's expected. But at the same time, it's upsetting to continuously solely focus on these systems instead of the actual reality of these people and the things that human beings go through, and the fact that human beings can actually change. So I feel for my people, because at the end of the day, it's another way to target. It's another way to label. It's another way to dehumanize a people. And when you have a system that's set up to fail certain people, where this system is not doing justice, because a person can not do anything at all, cannot create this, cannot actually do the crime. Like I have a brother who is currently on the registry, and he was incarcerated for almost 20 years. And when he was incarcerated, the person said that he raped them. Then it came back after they did all their tests that the hymen was still intact. So the person it was impossible for this person to be raped. Her hymen was still intact. After they realized the hymen was still intact, they said that this person touched her butt. You cannot prove whether you touched someone's butt or not, but you can prove whether a person was raped or not. So when it was determined that this person was not raped, they then went on to say, well, you touched her butt, and this person is still on the registry now after serving time for a crime that was not committed, with proof that this crime was not committed. So when you can target a specific group of people and say what you want to say, and if that doesn't work, you can switch it up to suit your needs and still target this person. I don't see it as doing justice for a person, especially when you have a teenager who touches a child's butt, a person who pees behind a bush, and a person who rapes a little girl. Those are all three different types of charges, but they are all labeled and classified as the same. So there's no way of separation to know the risk levels of a person, but they put all these people into one category. So it's largely upsetting.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. Aaron, I want to ask you the same thing as well. Like, as far as I know, a lot of this knowledge as well. Just to kind of, what are your thoughts? What comes up? Because again, as we both know, and all of us know that's on here, I feel like we know many men and women who have, who have not necessarily been able to either express or have these conversations or even have the knowledge. Especially when you're in court and you have a public defender that may not, that may not fight for you as well as someone else, but that's a whole nother topic. I think that's going to be our next discussion. but we're doing some things about that as well. So Aaron, if you don't mind just kind of sharing with us your thoughts after reading what Karen has shared.
It's a lot. I want to start off. I'm going to share a piece of paper with you guys. And I hope you can see it. Are you able to see it at all?
We can see it. Maybe I need my bifocals on to really see it, but you may have to read it, and that may be better.
Yeah. So it's some numbers on here.
Or can we, let's see if we can ping you.
I can see.
There we go. There we go. Wait, I just pinged you, so it made it better. Okay.
Okay. So it's some numbers on here. Mm-hmm. At the top, you see 240. It says past due 8,880. Total amount due 9,120. These are all the numbers on here. This is just me alone.
If you don't mind covering up your address for me, please.
Oh, I know.
I mean, yes. However, Aaron's address is public for the entire world to see.
That's true.
Wants to know
that's
it.
true.
So
that's true. That's true.
That was a great point. Like most of us, there's a great reason that we don't want to. That we blur those out. So
yeah.
So I share that because we commonly hear that we don't have any privatized prisons in the state of Wisconsin. And if you hear that, that would be true. That's a very true statement. However, everything inside the prison is very much privatized. Everything from your canteen to your GPS, to you pay to be on supervision, which is separate from paying to be on GPS, which is separate from if you take any programs, that too also you have to pay for those things, right? This is a continuous buildup of taking from a people that don't have nothing anyways, right? We're not able to be, I mean, when you've been in prison, you're not able to make money. You're not able to go out and, obtain a job or any of those different things. However, you continue to take, right? And so currently I have a bill of $9,120, right? And so the question has to be asked, now I'm back in the community, how am I supposed to be able to pay for that? Also, I have to pay for making sure I keep a roof over my head, right? Making sure I have food on my table, all of those different things. And so what you start to see is this is no longer about protecting of the community. What you're seeing is this is a business. Mm-hmm. And it's a very strategic, as if I was Anthony Cooper, what I would say is this is what you see is a business plan that has been set in such a way in which now people eat off of this, right? A multitude of people eat off of this. And because they eat off of it, the likelihood of them wanting to change the dynamics is almost slim to none because it's so beneficial to a multitude of people, right? And so because this is one of the most strategic business plans that you've ever seen, right? You see a multitude of people affected by it. And at the end of the day, there's nothing humane about this in any way, shape, or form, right? You hurting our community in such a way because everything is always under the umbrella. Well, we're protecting the community. We're protecting the community. Well, we're starting to see this has nothing to, anytime you send someone away at the age of 15, 16 years old, and now they getting out and they're 40, 45, and you saying, hey, now I want you to go do the right thing. And no, you actually, that makes the community that much less safer, right? You're making it that much more or less safer. And so until we take away the monetary piece of this, you'll never really, I don't even know why we call it corrections, because the objective has nothing to do with correcting the behavior. What you're really doing is, again, it's business as usual. Mm-hmm. And so it's not until people start to see that this has nothing to do with protecting our community in any way, shape, or form. In any way, shape, or form. So when you ask me the question, how do I feel about what Dr. Reese has talked about? These are the things that I feel, and these are the things that I believe that is so important for the community to know. And one final thing is this: I'm currently no longer on any supervision whatsoever, none, right? But if my bracelet is not acting correctly, you know what happens? The police show up at my door. Now, guess why they come to my door? Not to arrest me, not to put me in handcuffs or anything. The only thing they will say to me is, we just want to see your ankle and make sure the bracelet is still on there. That comes out of taxpayers. Taxpayers are paying for that, for the police to show up at my door. And then if I don't do what they say, I get letters kind of like this, very similar, but a little bit different. And it tells me, if you don't do this, that will be a Class H felony and we can charge you. Again, it just shows it has nothing to do with protecting the community in any way, shape, or form. And as long as they put that out there, people will believe that. But I'm here to tell you today, please believe me, it has nothing to do with the safety of the community in any way, shape, or form.
Something also, I just wanted to just add, and I'm asking this to you, Aaron, because even once that amount is paid off, because obviously there's been times that when you weren't able to pay because you have to pay rent, you have to, you have a family and things of that nature. And so I mean, you have to do the things to at least be able to live life, right? Now that you're out in the community. But even once that is paid off, that still does not take the bracelet off of your ankle. Is that correct?
It doesn't take the bracelet off the ankle, nor what most people don't realize, I have to pay $240 every month for the remainder of my life. So they, again, what is the purpose of making me pay for this for the rest of my life? It, in no way, shape, or form is that keeping the community safe, because I have to pay $240 for the remainder of my life. Every month, not just once a year, not just, this is monthly. Every month I get one of these. And the ripple effect to this is it affects your credit score. It also, the other ripple effect to this is whenever your taxes come in, it will be intercepted. And then they take your taxes, and guess who gets it? The Department of Corrections. Their budget is already over 1.3 billion. Nevertheless, no one questions in any way, shape, or form, what is all of it? Where's this money going? It's definitely not going to the community, right? So if we know it's not going there, then we have to find out where exactly is this going. And I believe my screen freezed.
Oh, no, we can hear you clearly.
Okay.
You're
Okay.
just fine. Thank you.
So definitely, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. And there's, and the reason why I brought up that point, because I want our audience to know that we're, again, to something I say often is the fact that it's not about correcting the behavior. It is a business plan. It's a business plan that is not flawed. Is a business plan that states, that we're talking about Wisconsin, but the United States is basically being paid off of. Sorry.
You muted yourself, Coop.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so if there's, so those are just some of the things that we have to. That it is mainly, it's a business plan, and there's nothing that we can, at this point in time, it seems that there's nothing that we can do about it, but things have to change. Okay. Because it's going to be a ripple effect that is going to affect us. It's going to affect generations. So if we don't do something about it now.
Coop, can I answer a question from the chat?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
No, that's okay. I just thought it was a great question. Given that the present system does not make us safer, what would be an effective way of protecting the community? I think, we have a lot of discussion about evidence-based practice these days, and at a very minimum, ensuring that everyone who has been convicted of a crime after their sentence can get a job, has their basic needs met, has a roof over their head, has food, has clothing, is able to reconnect with family. Therapies, as long as the therapies are appropriate for the person's position and not, customized or mandated by law or regulation, that's really helpful. So the biggest thing here, and I think a lot of our research shows that the better off we can make people who have been convicted of crimes, including and especially people convicted of sexual offenses, the better off we can make them and help them, live great in the community, the safer everyone is. There's tons of evidence that talks about that. On the other end, the idea of law enforcement keeping their own list of people who have committed very serious sexual offenses or who are known to be repeat offenders, that's a great idea. That was working well for law enforcement. At this point, we've diluted it, so it's not working. But if law enforcement know, then they can keep an eye on things. We still, while there are those people who will commit repeat offenses, the vast majority of offenses are committed by people who are well known to the family, family friend, family member, or that sort of thing, not just a person randomly walking the streets looking to snatch a child. So yeah, just making sure that people are taken care of.
And I just want to add
I
that
agree.
even though even with this being a business, it's easier to instill fear into people and to make them feel like something is going to change with that fear that arises in them. And that's one of the tactics that the government usually uses, is that fear tactic, to make people afraid or to feel like there's something to fear with these people. And then they put all the people again in the same category. And once people start to fear and think that, oh my God, we need to be safe, then they start to invest, like, oh yeah, I agree that you should do this, I agree that you should do this. So as a community, we need to start seeing people as people. I challenge everybody, when you see somebody, don't look at them as their title, look at them as a person. And we as a community are going to have to be the ones to change that, because we put these people in office and we vote for these, legislative changes, and then we wonder, how is it going to change? It's going to change with our thoughts about each other.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Aaron, was there anything else that you want to add?
The final thing I would say is, to everything that people have heard from each panelist, it will take us collectively to work together to change these dynamics. Um, we're not even using research, studies. We are using fear tactics. We have created sexual offense as the new boogeyman. And we know that people are ignorant to understanding of sexual offenses. And so I think the more clarity we get, the more we start to use evidence practices and those type of things, the more we start to utilize those things, the more effective we can be. As long as we keep it under the umbrella where there's something monetary where people gain and benefit from it, then people will manipulate it as long as they can, because it is a cash cow, right? And they doing it on the basis of fear and ignorance. And if I could leave us with a scripture, it says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. So it's for us to be educated about what's taking place so that we can no longer live in a society where everything is based on dollars and cents. That's the only, you know what I mean? Like that, it's greedy. It's greedy. It's not right. It's not acceptable. And Wisconsin is leading the nation in incarcerating Black and brown people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why can't we be leading the nation in something great and good? Why does it have to be something so like this? This doesn't make sense. And why would Wisconsinites accept anything less than something great? Because this is a great state and we can do some great things, but it takes people standing up and saying, this is not okay. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you guys listening. And I just, any questions, even after this, feel free to reach out, email, all of those different things. We greatly appreciate you. And I thank every person that listened to this today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aaron, so much. And something I do want to just kind of just add to that is the fact that what Aaron stated, those are not new statistics, right? This is something that we've been talking about for 10, 15, 20 years, if not more. So, again, to what Aaron had mentioned, the time is now, because we've already talked about it way back when, and it's still happening. And the fact that history is not going to do anything but repeat itself if we do not act in the now. So, I know we're kind of wrapping up here. I don't know if anyone wants to just share a couple things within the last 3 minutes. Matter of fact, let me see if we go over to if there's any questions.
I'll just throw out, Coop, that we really need more people who are advocating in favor of changing these laws. Mm-hmm. It can be a tricky position to be in because there's such a heavy stigma associated with these. But if you're interested in getting involved in either researching these issues or advocating for them, you can go to Nehemiah's website. We have a volunteer form that you can fill out, and RCA, if you wouldn't mind throwing that in the chat so folks can sign up, that would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to share, LaToya?
No, I want to share my background because I think that's important. And it says, freedom comes when we reclaim it. And as a community, it's time for us to start reclaiming our freedom, and not the freedom that people present to us, and we perceive it as freedom because this is what they said is freedom. I challenge us to go deeper than what people say, and to do the research ourselves, and to acknowledge the fact that everything that people puts out in the media is not always the accurate facts, and that sometimes the media is used to do exactly what it's there for. So
Awesome. That's beautiful. Again, I want to thank every single last one of you, our panelists, also our participants. I appreciate the questions, and just going forward, just know that we will be having. We don't have our next. Well, we're working on our next one that will be coming up here pretty soon. So within the next month or two. So please be on the lookout either on our page or on our Facebook page as far as for when our next Lunch and Learn would be. Yeah, and feel free, please go over to our website. I think that's important to really see all the amazing work that we're doing, not only just in reentry, but also through a wide range of other programs, or even check out our Justify Anger as well. And actually our next Lunch and Learn will be on March 18th. We will be having some great discussions on that day as well. So I believe all of our emails are out there in the public. So
I have one thing I wanted to share.
Yeah,
just a praise report, and I wanted to share with everybody on here. An anonymous donor actually donated some money towards me being on this bracelet to help pay for it. I have no clue who it was, but I'm grateful for that, and I appreciate that. But ultimately, if you really want to help me get this off. To live like this is like having the ball and the chain all over again. So I appreciate you. I thank you, every person that whatever you contribute, I just really appreciate it and thank you. And that's my praise report.
Awesome. Thank you. And we thank you as well as the organization. That's a blessing. So until next time, until March 18th, please be on the lookout for what we will be doing in the community. Thank you all for coming and joining us today, and looking forward to seeing you next time. God bless.